It was a quiet Sunday afternoon when Margot first felt the unease. She was sitting at her kitchen table, a steaming mug of chamomile tea in hand, leafing through the mail. Bills. A couple of charity solicitations, nothing unusual. Then she noticed a thick envelope from Golden Years Financial Planning. She frowned. She had never asked for their brochures. Something about the glossy paper made her heart stutter. A week before her daughter Clara had called, "Mum." Clara's voice had been unusually soft. "I've been thinking, maybe you shouldn't worry about the taxes and the utilities anymore. Let me handle it." Margot had laughed it off. She loved keeping track of those little details. It gave her a sense of purpose. But Clara's tone lingered in her mind, like the echo of a half-forgotten dream. That evening, Clara and her husband Derek arrived unannounced with takeout boxes from their favorite Chinese restaurant. They settled yourselves on the couch in Margot's living room, where the late afternoon sun painted golden rectangles on the carpet. Clara crossed her legs, her arms wrapped around herself as if to hold back her own nerves. "Mum," she began, "Derek and I have been talking. We think it's time you slowed down. Your house is so big. The yard work, the bills. You don't have to worry about any of that." Margot's knuckles whitened around her cup. "Not without your blessing," she said calmly. "I like my garden." Clara leaned forward. "We've found a wonderful community home for you. It's called Willow Springs Assisted Living. They have a library arts classes, and you can use the extra money from selling the house for travel." Margot lifted her chin. She could taste the polite coercion in Clara's words. She remembered well how Derek, once a small business owner, had lost everything to a fallen market. He had battled his way back, but left scars on her heart. "I appreciate the thought," Margot said, voice steady, "but this is my home." That night, sleep came fitfully. Margot's mind replayed Clara's gentle insistence, Derek's tight smile when she'd refused. The next morning, she called her banker, Mr. Fitzgerald, at the nearby community branch, where she'd held her accounts for over 20 years. Just a routine check, she told him, though. In her gut, she knew why. At the branch, she slid into Mr. Fitzgerald's office and watched as he pulled up her records. "Everything looks fine," he said, then paused. "Actually, we did have an inquiry yesterday." He tapped the screen. "Someone provided a power of attorney form to access your statements. I didn't recognize the signature." Margot felt a cold flush on her neck. "Who?" He frowned. "They said they were your daughter's husband." Bracing herself against the desk, Margot managed a nod. "Thanks for catching that. Please flag any further attempts." Walking back to her car, the autumn wind lifted fallen leaves around her ankles. She realized how easy it was for someone who loved her to cross the line, whether out of concern or convenience or something darker. That afternoon, Margot called her lifelong friend Linda and asked her to meet for coffee at the little cafe down the street. When Linda arrived, Margot saw the worry in her eyes and began to speak. She told Linda about the brochure, about Clara's suggestion to sell about the forged document at the bank. All the while, the rich scent of brewing espresso filled the air. Linda listened without interrupting, her hands wrapped around her mug. "You're not overreacting," Linda said finally. "This is financial abuse. It happens to so many seniors, especially those who have worked all their lives to build something. You need help." Margot nodded relief, mixing with resolve. "I want a lawyer," she said. "Someone who understands elder law. And I want to lock down my accounts, so no one, no matter how caring they sound, can access them without me knowing." The next day, she called an attorney recommended by Linda. By that afternoon, she was sitting in his office, a bright room filled with shelves of leather-bound books. The attorney, Mr. Perez, listened carefully as Margot laid out the story. The suggestive comments, the unsolicited brochures, the attempted access to her bank. He nodded gravely. First, he said, we'll revoke any unauthorized powers of attorney and file an affidavit of your capacity with the court. That way, anyone claiming you're unfit to handle your affairs will have a high bar to clear. He explained how forging a POA was a felony and how the court could freeze those claims immediately. Margot felt a weight lift from her shoulders. Then he continued, we'll set up transaction alerts on your accounts, two-factor authentication, immediate push notifications for any withdrawal, and we'll consider placing your home into a living trust, one that names you as sole trustee during your lifetime, with limitations on anyone else's access. He spoke in clear, kind terms, as if reading from a gentle script. Margot realized how crucial it was to have someone on her side who understood both the law and the vulnerability that comes with age and love that sometimes turns possessive. Over the next week, Margot took small but decisive steps. She visited her local hardware store and arranged for new locks on her doors. She hired a security consultant to install motion-activated lights and a doorbell camera that sent recordings straight to her phone. At the bank, Mr. Fitzgerald set up the fraud alerts, and the next time someone tried to access her account, she received an instant text. But the heart of her plan lay in her new trust documents. Instead of granting someone carte blanche over her finances, Margot had chosen Mira, her goddaughter, and James, her nephew, as co-trustees. They lived out of state, had no personal agenda, and agreed to act only on Margot's express instructions. That evening, as she signed the final pages in Mr. Perez's office, she felt a steady power flow through her veins, a calm certainty that this time she would be the one in control. In the weeks that followed, Clara and Derek tried again. They dropped by with pastries, tried to soothe her with gentle reminders about not overexerting herself. But Margot had rehearsed her response. Thank you, she would say, but I have everything under control. No tears, no anger, just a warm smile that masked the iron in her resolve. One afternoon, Derek called voice tight. Mum, this is getting out of hand. We just want what's best for you. Margot took a slow breath. What's best for me, she said, is knowing I can live in the home I built and tend my garden, without fear that someone will take everything away. She heard the pin-drop silence on the other end and allowed herself a small, quiet smile. That night, she sat on her front porch, the sky painted in deep purples and blues. Her roses, still vibrant despite the approaching winter, glowed in the lamplight. With her hands folded in her lap, she reflected on what had nearly slipped from her grasp. Her autonomy, her peace of mind, her sense of purpose. Recognizing financial abuse had been the crucial first step. Understanding how easily it could hide behind love had been the next. And acting firmly, decisively with the support of friends, bankers, and lawyers had been the key to reclaiming her life. As a soft breeze stirred the petals, Margot whispered to herself, no one is touching my garden. No one is touching my assets. And in that moment, she knew her home was truly hers again. Next, we'll explore the legal foundations. Power of attorney conservatorships and the different types of trusts to build a rock-solid framework for protecting assets and autonomy. Mr. Perez leaned back in his leather chair and offered Margot a gentle nod. Now that we've secured your immediate protections, let's talk about the legal tools you should understand, power of attorney conservatorships and trusts. Each has its place, but used or misused them poorly, you could unintentionally open doors you never meant to. Margot sipped her water, her fingers tracing the rim of the glass. She felt safe here, absorbing information instead of being blindsided by it. Power of attorney POA. True authority versus false promise. Think of a power of attorney Perez began as a legal baton you hand to someone to act on your behalf. He pushed a sheet across the desk. On it, simple definitions: financial POA, medical POA, durable springing. Financial POA: let someone pay your bills, manage investments, even sell property depending on how it's written. A medical POA lets someone make health decisions if you can't. Durable means it stays in effect if you become incapacitated. Springing only kicks in at a certain point, usually when a doctor certifies incapacity. Margot read the words, picturing a baton, and wondering how many people grabbed one without asking, "Do I really trust you with this?" Most people sign a general POA without limits. Perez continued. So their agent has sweeping powers. That's the mistake. Always include detailed instructions which accounts what property, how much money, and under what conditions. And choose someone completely trustworthy, ideally a professional or a neutral third party, so that emotions don't cloud judgment. He looked at Margot. You saw the forged POA at your bank. That's the worst-case scenario. A dishonest actor submits false documents and gains access. Margot nodded. She remembered the chill in her spine when Mr. Fitzgerald showed her the fraudulent signature. Real-life example, Perez said in Florida last year, an adult daughter forged her mother's signature on a medical POA, then admitted her to a nursing facility and siphoned off $200,000 from her retirement account. The medical team noticed the daughter couldn't provide consistent medical histories, and lawyers uncovered the forgery. It resulted in a felony conviction, but only after irreversible damage was done. Margot shivered. That could have been her. Always file your POA with your attorney and keep it incredibly specific. Better yet, revoke any untrusted POAs immediately and inform all relevant institutions, banks, brokerage firms, your doctor's office that no one but you may act unless they have our newly executed document. Conservatorship and guardianship. When courts step in, Perez leaned forward, clicking his pen. If someone petitions the court, claiming you're unable to manage your affairs, they can seek conservatorship. What some states call guardianship. California calls it conservatorship. Texas calls it guardianship. But the essence is the same: a judge appoints someone to make decisions for you. He slid 2 columns of text across the desk. One headed California, the other Texas. California conservatorship requires a petition to the Superior Court, 2 physicians' declarations, and a hearing. The conservator files annual reports, and the conservatee can request termination or modification. Texas guardianship petition to the probate court. 1 physician's certificate and a guardianship hearing. The guardian files biannual reports, and family members can contest. In California, Perez explained the conservatee has more procedural protections, noticed a family right to counsel. Texas moves faster, but may offer less transparency. Either way, once granted, the conservator can control money, sell property, and make medical decisions with court oversight. But oversight can lag. Margot thought of Clara's comments, how easily her daughter had suggested selling the house and placing her in assisted living. If someone files for conservatorship against you, Perez went on, you need to respond in court, often within days. You can appoint an attorney to represent you, file a physician's statement of your competence, and request a jury trial in some jurisdictions. But fighting conservatorship is costly and stressful. Better to keep everyone from even thinking you're vulnerable. He tapped a footnote. In New York, the standard is incapacity by clear and convincing evidence. In Florida, it's unable to manage property and affairs. Each state differs slightly, but the trend is to protect the elderly and sometimes overprotect them, leaving them stripped of autonomy. Revocable versus irrevocable. Trusts, choosing flexibility or fortress. Margot glanced at the page labeled Trusts. Trusts. Perez said, let you remove assets from your name while retaining control. A revocable living trust is easy to change if you decide your nephew shouldn't be trustee anymore. You can amend or revoke it. Everything stays in trust until you pass or revoke it. But because it's revocable, it doesn't protect you from someone alleging incapacity. He picked up an apple from the desk, symbolically slicing it. Here's your estate, your assets. A revocable trust keeps everything inside the apple. But a conservatorship can still target that apple. An irrevocable trust, he continued, is like you carve the apple into pieces and hand them to a vault under your control. You can be beneficiary, but you can't change beneficiary or trustee without going through court. That means no conservator or trustee you don't name can touch it. Margot pictured her roses, each petal a small fortune of love and labour, and the house itself, ringing up a market value she and Richard had never imagined when they built the porch 2 decades ago. Example Perez said a couple in Ohio placed their home and investment accounts into an irrevocable trust, naming an independent corporate trustee. When their grandson tried to claim they no longer understood their finances, the court dismissed the conservatorship petition because the assets were already held outside the couple's name in trust. They remained beneficiaries, living rent-free in their home until they passed, and the trust then distributed assets to heirs per the document. Case closed. Margot felt the fortress-like strength of that arrangement, choosing the right tool for the right job. Perez leaned back, folding his hands. None of these tools is perfect. A POA is dangerous if given to the wrong person. A conservatorship can strip your rights. An irrevocable trust gives you protection but inflexibility. My advice is layered revoke unauthorized POAs, keep a springing POA drafted by me, so it only activates if 2 physicians declare incapacity. File your affidavit of capacity today. Establish a revocable living trust as an intermediary step. Then convert to an irrevocable trust when you feel absolutely confident. He laid out a checklist. Revoke unwanted POAs in writing, notify all institutions. File affidavit of capacity with the court to preempt conservatorship. Set up alerts on all financial accounts for withdrawals over $500. Draft springing POA with dual physician requirement. Establish revocable trust immediately with successor trustee named. Plan irrevocable trust when you're ready to lock it down. Margot reviewed each step, imagining the peace of mind each line would bring. A warm conclusion before action. As the sunlight waned outside his office window, Perez smiled. You've done more in these past weeks than most people manage in a lifetime of worry. Understanding these legal instruments is like learning the language of your own autonomy. Margot stood her shoulders straight, her heart light. Thank you, she said, for speaking plainly and for caring. She left the office, clutching the checklist and new documents each packet. A promise that no one, however well-meaning or ill-intentioned, could take what she had built. Outside, she paused under a lamppost, its glow soft and steady. A family walked by, children chasing each other, laughter drifting on the breeze. Margot realized that her next step wasn't just legal, it was living. She would return home, tend her roses, and feel the earth under her fingertips. Secure in the knowledge that her story, her garden, her savings, her own choices would remain hers alone. In the next section, we'll explore the practical steps Margot took to fortify her home and bank accounts, creating a shield, both physical and digital, that no one can breach without her knowledge. Margot arrived home that morning with a sense of purpose she hadn't felt in years. Sunlight filtered through her ivy-draped windows as she set down her tote bag on the kitchen counter. Inside were neatly organized folders, bank statements, insurance policies, deeds, retirement account summaries. She took a deep breath. Today she would build the foundation of her fortress. First, she spread everything out on the oak dining table, a pile for checking and savings accounts, a stack for investment portfolios, her IRA, her modest brokerage account. Next came life insurance policies, annuity contracts, her homeowner's policy. Finally, the deed to her property and the appraisal report she'd commissioned. She ran her fingers gently over each paper, speaking softly as if acknowledging old friends. "I know you," she whispered. "You're mine." She checked off each item on her handwritten inventory list. Checking account at Maple Street Bank. Savings account at Maple Street Bank. IRA at Blue Ridge Investments. Brokerage account at Blue Ridge Investments. Homeowners Insurance Safe Haven Insurance Co. Life insurance policy Horizon Life. Deed and appraisal report. Once the list was complete, Margot called her financial advisor Daniel Chen, whose office overlooked a quiet courtyard. Daniel had helped her and Richard sketch out their retirement plan years ago, and she trusted him implicitly. He greeted her with his usual warmth. "Morning, Margot." "Everything all right?" Margot explained. She was updating her inventory and needed his help verifying that each account was secure. Daniel invited her in, and together they reviewed each statement on his dual monitors. "Looks like everything's in order," he said, pausing at her IRA. "But I notice a few recurring wire transfers you don't recognize. They're small, $50 here, $75 there, but still. You weren't expecting those?" Margot frowned. "No. I pay my bills directly, and I don't recall authorizing anything like that." Daniel nodded. "I'll flag these immediately and reverse any unauthorized transactions. We'll set up dual authorization on all accounts over $500. You'll get a text message and an email if anything unusual happens." As he worked, Margot admired the calm efficiency of his office shelves of reference books, a potted fern by the window, a kettle gently steaming on a side table. By the time she left, each account had an extra layer of digital protection, multi-factor authentication, instant transaction alerts, and a direct line to Daniel's team if she ever needed assistance. Next on her list was her attorney, Mr. Perez. She drove to his office and watched the steady rain mist the streets. Perez greeted her in the lobby and led her to his conference room where they reviewed her revised estate plan. "Today we'll update your will and your revocable living trust," he said. "We'll add a no contest clause so anyone who challenges the trust forfeits their inheritance. We'll also file your affidavit of capacity with the clerk's office. That affidavit, along with your physician's certificate, will make any petition for conservatorship far more difficult." He slid new documents across the table, an updated will listing her goddaughter Mira and nephew James as executors, a revised trust agreement naming them as successor trustees, and the affidavit forms. Margot signed each page with deliberate care, feeling the weight of her signature, a declaration that she still stood strong. By noon, the documents were in Perez's capable hands for filing. He promised to confirm the records were recorded by the end of the week. Margot thanked him and stepped outside into a patch of sunlight. Rain had washed the air clean and the city felt fresh. Her next stop was Hardware, the local locksmith shop. Inside, the bell tinkled as she entered. A young locksmith named Tony greeted her, wiping his hands on a rag. "I need to change every exterior lock," Margot said. "Front door, back door, garage, reinforced deadbolts." He nodded eagerly. "I've got heavy-duty steel deadbolts, bump-resistant. I can also install smart locks keyed to your phone, but I recommend keeping a manual key as backup." Margot considered. "Let's do both." An hour later, she watched as Tony worked. He replaced the brass key cylinder with a high-security steel bolt. He explained how the pick-resistant pins prevented forced entry. Margot felt a small thrill of relief when he tested the deadbolt with a firm turn. "Solid as a bank vault," he said with a grin. Back home, Margot carried her groceries inside and found the new locks gleamed in the late afternoon light. She tested each door, feeling the satisfying click of metal engaging. Her house felt more hers with every rotation of the key. That evening, she met with a security consultant, Rosa Martinez, who specialized in home protection for seniors. Rosa arrived at twilight carrying a floor plan and a small camera. "I recommend motion-activated lights on the walkway and back patio," Rosa said, "and a video doorbell at your front entrance. We'll connect everything to an app on your phone." Margot nodded. "I'd like cameras covering each entrance and a discrete camera in the living room." Rosa showed her the tiny lens hidden in a bookshelf bracket. "It records to an encrypted cloud server. You can review footage any time." By the end of the night, Margot's home hummed with silent sentinels' lights that shone when shadows passed locks that resisted every jiggle cameras that watched without blinking. The next morning, she stopped at the bank once more. Mr. Fitzgerald greeted her with a knowing smile. "Your security settings are all in place. We've set daily balance alerts and require your password plus biometric verification for any transaction over $1,000. Margot thanked him. As she left, she realized how many layers she had added in less than a week: legal, financial, physical, digital. Each felt like a blanket wrapping her in safety. Finally, she considered her circle of advisors. It wasn't just the professionals. It was the people she chose to trust. Mira, her goddaughter who lived 3 states away but checked in weekly. James, her nephew, who brought her soup on rainy days. Linda, her lifelong friend, who offered emotional steadiness. And the new allies, Daniel Perez, Tony Rosa experts, who treated her concerns with respect rather than impatience. That night, Margot sat in her garden, the scent of fall mums drifting around her. She held a small journal and wrote, "My team of protection goddaughter Mira Johnson, co-trustee, nephew James O'Connell, co-trustee, attorney Luis Perez, estate planning, financial advisor Daniel Chen, CFP, locksmith Antonio Tony Ruiz, security consultant Rosa Martinez, banker Samuel Fitzgerald." She closed the journal and pressed her fist to her heart. These names weren't just words. They were promise keepers. As the moon rose, Margot looked up and whispered, "Thank you." Not just to her team, but to herself. Her courage, her wisdom, her willingness to protect all she had built. Tomorrow she would visit the neighborhood community center to share her story, to make sure no one else in her town felt too embarrassed or ashamed to speak up. She knew how vital community support could be, how a network of caring souls could strengthen individual resolve. With that intention in mind, she walked back inside, turned off the lights and closed the door on a chapter of fear. Ahead lay connection healing, and the quiet confidence that this home, her home, was hers to cherish now and always. Next, we'll explore how Margot leaned on community resources and nurtured her own well-being as she navigated the emotional challenges of protecting her autonomy and legacy. Margot stepped into the warm foyer of the Cedarville Community Center on a crisp Wednesday morning. The scent of brewing coffee mingled with the faint hum of conversation in the hallways. She clutched her tote bag, now lighter without all the legal papers, and felt a flutter of nerves. Today, she was here for more than a yoga class. She was here to connect, to share, and to heal. She found the Elder Empowerment Support Group room at the end of the corridor. A circle of folding chairs faced inward. A hand-lettered sign proclaimed, "You are not alone." Margot took a moment to breathe deeply before stepping forward. "Hello," she said, voice soft but steady. "I'm Margot." A dozen pairs of eyes turned to her, some curious, some gentle, all welcoming. An elderly man with a kind face nodded. "I'm Richard," he said, "and I'm glad you're here." The facilitator, a social worker named Tanya, invited Margot to sit. Today, we're sharing stories of resilience, she explained. Who would like to start? Margot took the lead. I recently realized that people closest to me, my daughter and her husband, were trying to take control of my home and finances. Her voice caught for a moment, but she pressed on. It felt like a betrayal. But I've taken steps, legal, financial, physical, to protect myself. And I'm here to learn how to cope with the emotional fallout. Heads nodded knowingly. A woman named Gloria cleared her throat. I went through something similar, Gloria said. My granddaughter convinced me to sign a power of attorney. 2 months later, I found my savings drained. She held back tears. Joining this group saved me. Another member, Harold, added, APS Adult Protective Services helped me report a case of financial abuse. They walked me through the process. Tanya interjected gently. Yes, APS is available in every county. You can call your local office to report suspected elder abuse, financial, emotional, even neglect. Margot listened, feeling her shoulders ease. These weren't just abstract resources. They were lifelines. After the group discussion, Tanya handed out a laminated directory, AARP Elder Abuse Hotline, 1-800-424-3417, Adult Protective Services, APS, Local County Number, National Center on Elder Abuse Information and Referrals, Cedarville, Senior Friends, Network, weekly check-ins, meal deliveries, friendly visits. Margot tucked the sheet into her tote. Thank you, she said. This is exactly what I needed. Later that afternoon, she ventured into the adjacent multipurpose room for Silver Yoga, a gentle chair-assisted class for older adults. The instructor, Elena, guided them through slow stretches, encouraging mindful breathing. Margot felt the tightness in her back ease her racing thoughts slow. As she lifted her arms overhead and exhaled, she realized self-care wasn't a luxury. It was part of her defense. After class, Elena handed out slips of paper listing self-care strategies, mindful breathing, 5 minutes each morning, progressive muscle relaxation, release tension head to toe, guided imagery, visualize a safe, happy place, creative expression, drawing, writing, or crafting. Margot folded the paper and placed it in her journal. She promised herself every morning she would spend 5 minutes with her eyes closed, breathing deeply. That evening, back home in her living room, Margot pulled out a small art kit she had ordered weeks ago. Watercolors, brushes, a pad of thick paper. She sat up by the window and dabbed pale pink on the page, letting the brush move without agenda. The strokes felt liberating. She painted a simple rose, her favorite petals unfurling in vibrant color. When she finished, she gazed at the painting heart, warm with quiet pride. A day later, at her kitchen table, Margot dialed the AARP Elder Abuse Hotline. A patient voice answered. How can we help you today? Margot explained her situation. The counselor listened and then walked her through additional steps. Document everything. Keep a log of suspicious calls or visits. Copy all legal filings. Save receipts from court filings and attorney correspondence. Emergency contact. Provide your lawyer's number to APS, the police, and your bank's fraud department. Community Watch inform trusted neighbors to call you or APS if they see unusual activity. Margot felt a surge of relief. This was no longer a secret shame. She had allies at her side, a plan in place. She decided to make her own contribution to the community. The next week, she volunteered at the Cedarville Senior Friends Network's Friendly Call program. From a cozy nook at the community center, she phoned homebound seniors to offer a listening ear. Hello, Mrs. Lynn, she began one morning. It's Margot calling from Senior Friends. Mrs. Lynn's frail voice brightened. Oh, Margot, I always look forward to your calls. They chatted about spring flowers, grandchildren's antics, the latest mystery novels. At the end, Mrs. Lin confessed, "I'm worried about my nephew. He's been asking too many questions about my investments." Margot felt her heart tighten. "Have you spoken to your bank about setting up fraud alerts?" she asked gently. Mrs. Lin admitted no. Margot guided her through the steps, promising to follow up. By the end of the week, Ms. Lin had new security measures and the reassurance of community support. Through these calls, Margot found purpose beyond her own struggles. She realized that sharing her story not only empowered her, but also shielded others from similar pain. One Saturday afternoon, the community center held a resource fair for seniors. Margot staffed a table alongside AARP volunteers and APS representatives. She wore her favorite cardigan and handed out bookmarks she'd printed with her own motto, "Knowledge is your shield." Attendees stopped by asking questions. What's the difference between a living trust and a will? How do I check if someone has filed a conservatorship petition against me? Can APS help if my caregiver takes my credit card without permission? Margot answered each with compassion and clarity, drawing from her own journey and the expertise of the professionals beside her. A young lawyer from the local legal aid office offered to review attendees' POAs free of charge. AARP volunteers booked one-on-one consultations on the spot. As the fair wound down, a woman approached Margot. "You're like me," she said, tears in her eyes. "I was too ashamed to talk about my granddaughter's lies. But you gave me courage." Margot hugged her gently. "We're stronger together." That evening back home, Margot sank into her favorite armchair and reflected on the whirlwind of activity. She had moved beyond fear into action legal steps, security upgrades, and now a network of connections that spanned neighbors, professionals, and friends. She picked up her journal and wrote, "My Community of Care Elder Empowerment Support Group, Silver Yoga with Elena, AARP Elder Abuse Hotline, APS, Cedarville County, Cedarville Senior Friends Friendly Call Program, Saturday Resource Fair Partners." She closed the journal and felt a profound gratitude. Her walls, once sources of isolation, had become bridges to a vibrant network. Margot smiled as she thought of tomorrow's plans. A pottery class to try something new, a lunch date with Gloria from the support group, and another friendly call to Mrs. Lin. Her final thought before sleep alone: "I was vulnerable. Together, we are invincible." Next, we'll bring it all together in 5 actionable steps, so you too can protect your assets, your autonomy, and your well-being. Margot woke early sunlight streaming through her bedroom window. Today, she would crystallize everything she'd learned into concrete action and share it as a roadmap for anyone facing similar challenges. She sat at her desk with her journal open and a fresh pen in hand. 5 essential action steps. Consult an elder law attorney. Yesterday, she had met with Mr. Perez one last time to review the final documents. He had walked her through the revocation of unauthorized powers of attorney, the filing of her affidavit of capacity, and the amendment of her will and trust. Margot remembered his calm reassurance. An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. Today, she would compile a list of local elder law attorneys, names, phone numbers, specialties, and share it at the community center's resource board. Secure financial accounts with multi-layered protection. Margot checked her phone. Every account had push notifications, enabled any withdrawal over $500, triggered an alert. Wire transfers required dual authorization. Credit cards were on lockdown until she verbally approved each transaction. She had learned that small, repeated withdrawals were just as dangerous as large ones. Today, she planned to meet her banker, Mr. Fitzgerald, to set up an annual review so she and her closest advisors could audit her statements together. Fortify your home, physically and digitally. The reinforced deadbolts clicked solid on her front door. The motion-activated lights bathed her walkway in safety at dusk. Hidden cameras recorded every entrance, and the recordings were backed up off-site. She placed the contact for her locksmith, Tony Ruiz, on the kitchen bulletin board, along with Rosa's security consultancy card. Today, she would test the system, invite a trusted neighbor to walk her property, and ensure no blind spots remained. Build a circle of trust friends, family professionals. Margot reread the list in her journal, Mira and James as co-trustees, Daniel Chen for financial guidance, Perez for legal counsel, Linda and Gloria for emotional support, the Cedarville Group and APS for community backing. She knew that isolation was the abuser's ally. So today she would host a simple afternoon tea on her porch. Sun hats, cucumber sandwiches, and warm smiles to thank each member of her support network and reinforce their commitment to watching out for one another. Share your story. Empower others. Over the past weeks, Margot had spoken at support group meetings, answered questions at resource fairs, and mentored Mrs. Lin through her own bank security upgrades. Today she would write a short guide, Knowledge is Your Shield, a senior's guide to protecting assets, and distribute printed copies at the community centre, the library, and her church hall. She'd include her own experiences as case studies, the 5 action steps, common pitfalls, and contact information for critical resources. Margot set aside her pen and surveyed her to-do list. Each item was a promise to herself and to others that she would not let fear rule her life. 5 mistakes to avoid. She flipped to a new page in her journal. Mistakes she had witnessed or nearly fallen victim to. Signing a general POA without limits. She thought of how Clara had casually suggested, "Let me take care of your bills," and how easily that could have granted unlimited control. She resolved never sign a POA without specific written boundaries. Ignoring small red flags. Those $50 wire transfers might have seemed negligible, yet they signaled someone testing the waters. She made a note address every suspicious transaction, no matter how small. Believing family couldn't harm you. You trust is a blessing, but blind trust can be dangerous. Even a daughter who once cradled her in her arms could be tempted. Now she knew always verify motives, even among loved ones. Delaying legal action. Because of embarrassment. She had hesitated to involve Adult Protective Services or speak at the support group. But she discovered that acknowledging vulnerability is strength, not shame. From now on, she would encourage openness, relying on a single point of failure. At first, she considered naming only one trusted friend as her agent. But life was unpredictable. People move, get sick, pass on. Instead, she chose multiple co-trustees, staggered responsibilities, and cross-checked with professionals. She read the list aloud to herself. Mistakes to avoid, lessons to love. 5 key takeaways. Margot paused, thinking about the broader truths distilled from her journey. She wrote, "Awareness is the first defense. Recognizing coercive language or unsolicited help is the spark that ignites protection. Documentation speaks louder than promises." A notarized affidavit recorded deed transfers, transaction logs. They all outlast verbal assurances. Layered security beats. Single solutions. Legal, financial, physical, digital, social. Each layer reinforces the next. Community turns. Vulnerability into strength. A support group, a friendly call program, a resource fair. Together, they form a safety net. Empowerment. Through sharing your story can save someone else's life. Silence shelters abusers. Voices spark change. Satisfied, Margot closed her journal. She carried it to the window and looked out over her garden, where her roses leaned toward the sun. The wind stirred the petals, and she felt a sense of quiet triumph. This wasn't about revenge. It was about preservation of dignity, of choice of legacy. Later that morning, she walked to her porch where a wicker love seat and matching chairs awaited. She arranged dainty teacups and a pot of Earl Grey. Soon Mira arrived fresh from her drive across state lines, bearing homemade lemon bars. James followed, carrying a bouquet of sunflowers grown in his backyard. Daniel popped his head over the fence to wave hello, and Linda arrived with Gloria in tow. They sipped tea and nibbled pastries, sharing laughter and recollections. Margot expressed her heartfelt gratitude. "Thank you," she said, her voice warm, "for standing by me. Today I feel more secure than ever." Mira reached across and took her hand. "We're family," she said softly. "We protect each other." That afternoon, Margot delivered her printed guide to the community center's front desk. She offered a copy to the receptionist, who promised to feature it on the lobby bulletin board. She slipped copies into greeting card slots at the library, and later left a stack at her church's fellowship hall. Each booklet was adorned with Margot's watercolor rose on the cover and titled "Knowledge is Your Shield." A senior's guide to protecting assets inside were her 5 action steps. The 5 mistakes to avoid the 5 key takeaways and resource lists. Attorneys' elder abuse hotlines, APS contacts, financial advisors, security consultants. By evening, Margot returned home, her heart full. She walked through her front door, the locks sturdy beneath her touch, and sat in her favorite armchair. The house lights glowed softly, cameras blinking in silent vigil. She felt the gentle thrum of protection, legal filings, secured bank accounts, monitored cameras, watching neighbors, caring community empowered. She rose and went to her garden one last time. Under the fading light, she knelt beside her roses and whispered, "This is your home. This is our life." The wind carried the farewell of dusk, and Margot smiled. She had turned fear into strength, vulnerability into connection, and a solitary battle into a communal triumph. With her action plan in hand and her community at her back, she knew the road ahead would be smooth, confident, and bright. And in that peace, she found the true essence of her legacy: a life lived on her own terms, protected by knowledge, fortified by love, and shared generously with others.